Good girl. Hello and welcome to Tea Time with me, Shaili Chopra. The state of the Indian economy is in a bit of a bunker, and that's going to be the subject of our discussion today as we try and get it out of that rough straight onto the green. Is the consumption story in India overrated? Are we really putting too many roadblocks to the growth story? That's what we're discussing with Sanjay Nayar of KKR India.
If the companies don't stay competitive, don't have an eye on margins, don't have a clear eye on market share, then it can be, quite a problem.
In the news on Tea Time, Azhara Munoz wins the Sybase Match Play Championship. Jason Duffner backs the Byron Nelson Championship Trophy. And in your golf tip, get those short putts right.
One of the main reasons of missing short putts is that we kind of de-accelerate the shoulder action through the putting stroke.
Hi.
Welcome to the show, Sanjay Nayar. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Good to have you here in Delhi as opposed to catching up with you in Mumbai. But golf, I believe you catch up with your golf in Bombay as well.
Yeah, once in a while. Used to be much more regular earlier, but not now, yeah.
So it's tennis all the way for private equity guys.
Much more tennis, yeah.
Yeah. That has a lot to do with the fact that you're in Bombay and you don't want to spare those 4 hours on the course?
Not really. You don't have any good courses there, so you end up spending so much time and playing 4 or 5 hours and end up drinking beer at the end of it. So it's not the same fun.
Not the same.
These are much better courses.
But tell me, talking of courses and fairways, private equity, finding it hard right now to be comfortably on the fairway?
The investments you already have, I think those are on the fairway, and you just got to keep at them every day, be very focused. And I think finding new deals is not easier. By the time you triangulate, finding a good quality promoter, good quality management, good valuation, yeah, it's quite difficult. But I think it's more because the growth in the economy itself is sort of slowed down.
Yeah.
So people don't need the money, and therefore, we guys have to obviously back Indian entrepreneurs. So when they begin to invest, I'm sure we will have a lot of deals there.
That's an interesting point that you make about entrepreneurship. But before that, you talked about the slowdown in the economy. Obviously, we're catering now for 6 to 7% kind of GDP growth, which would considerably lower the kind of returns or expectations that private equity may have from companies that they invest in.
That is true, but I think if you take a 5-6 year view, I think you revert back to the proper growth rate. Even for India, if you look at the secular trends, those haven't changed. So the real issue is that the short term looks a little uncertain, but you also get better opportunities and better valuations in these times than you get later on. So I think it's still a good time to invest. You just got to find people who've got great growth plans or good restructuring plans or whatever.
Yeah, or restructuring. That's largely because people do have restructuring plans now as they are reworking their business models or deciding what assets to throw and what to keep.
Yep, they're going to rationalize a lot more, which I think they should. I would be really surprised if private equity gets treated differently than FII from a negative point of view. That I think would be a terrible mistake. Secondly, I think private equity has a much longer term horizon. So all that the industry needs is clarity of rules on what will be the tax.
Yeah.
GAR, I can't comment on GAR because that's something which is frankly the right step to take for the long run for the country anyway.
True. Everybody's in principle agreed with that right. In the long term this is a good step, and if FIIs have gotten used to paying these kind of taxes in other parts of the world, why should India be an exception? Which, to be honest, is a fairly valid argument. But the question is the timing of it. Was this the ideal time for the government to bring it up? And, what it's done to the markets temporarily, even if so?
They had talked about GAR, in fact, 2 years ago. So it's not a big surprise to anyone, frankly. And you've got to start at some point in time. And there's always going to be that painful transition period.
And FIIs are posturing.
Whether it's this year or next year or whichever year, the fact is that if you get clarity on tax rates, I don't see why it should matter. And secondly, it's all about the Mauritius route, which frankly is a very valid route. It is there, it's available, and people are doing it the right way. So I think it's a little difficult.
And both governments are in the loop in it.
It's a difficult question for me to answer because that's a real policy issue. But I think India is a capital importing country. You just have to be mindful of the fact that you don't want to shun away capital right now when you need it. But I think in principle terms, anti-avoidance is something you need to move towards anyway. So,
so just too bad that it comes at a time when the rest of the world is in crisis. Our markets are shaky, but just too bad.
And therefore, I think if we get clarity of tax rates, at least for the future transactions, there'll be a lot of, enthusiasm.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into golf.
In the US, we used to, we have a lovely course in the US. And a couple of our Citibank friends would go and play every weekend. That's how we started, actually. No formal coaching, nothing. I'm basically a tennis player, but I think I can hit the ball, that's for sure. So short game is bad, the long game is good.
Oh, really? Then that tells me a little bit about how you do business then. Huh? Short term is what you don't think of too much then.
I think sure. I've never thought. I've always tried to be as strategic as possible in all my assignments and try to take it can be hard in execution, but try not to lose the strategic sense in everything that we do.
But what was the most exciting phase of your banking career at Citi?
When I moved from India, when I moved to the UK, when I moved to the UK to run our equity platform, and then I moved to the US to run the fixed income platform, I think that was the most exciting time because, frankly, I'd never done any of that stuff. Good old corporate finance people from India. But those were days when Citi picked up people and really moved them around laterally.
Right.
And I think finally the most exciting part was, being on the trading floor at Solomon for 5 years, or Solomon Citi combined for 5 years, and heading up the sales and trading outfit for fixed income was sort of the best. Learned a lot about the markets, and that's given me a huge change in perspective even after coming back to India.
Yeah.
And
was India a rude shock when you got back at that time?
No. I came back willingly. It was not a rude shock. Actually, in 01 and 02, things were just sort of
lifting themselves out of the tech bubble.
A lot of tailwinds here in 02, 03, and it was a pretty good time.
Yeah.
And I think we've built a terrific franchise at Citi, which is still going great guns, absolutely.
Let me ask you this. When you were in Citi in India, who did you turn to for any mentorship that you needed?
At the Citi job, when you start doing these kind of jobs, it does get a little alone there. It does get a little lonely. But I would say, in the marketplace here, you could easily talk to someone like Aditya very often. You could talk to Nanupam Nani, who was the previous CEO, who's always available. But, more importantly, in Citi, you can actually access the overseas network quite a bit. And having come from overseas, we knew the network pretty well. And that's what you would do. When you have the whole enterprise, there's not any one person who can advise you, but you can call up the product heads, you can call up, various industry heads and get advice.
Yeah.
But within India, I think, old friends and old bosses, they were the best. If the companies don't stay competitive, don't have an eye on margins, don't have a clear eye on market share, then it can be, quite a problem.